Welcome to the sixth monthly episode of CDFI Friendly America's The Future of CDFI series. We launched the series in January to encourage CDFI industry discussion about key strategic questions and issues affecting our sector. Thank you to everyone who joins us today for the webinar and who watches the webinars later on via YouTube. No topic is more important or more defining for the CDFI industry than the one we will talk about today: mission and message, CDFIs, and racial equity. We're going to talk about the importance of racial equity in the work of CDFIs, the role CDFIs play in achieving racial equity, and the Trump administration's far-reaching efforts. Personally, I believe they are misguided and malicious efforts to flip racial equity on its head. For those reasons, we are especially grateful to the two CDFI industry leaders who are joining us to teach, share, and learn. Amber Banks is a longtime CDFI practitioner who stepped into the role of president and CEO of the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs beginning in January of this year. And Dwan Andrade runs the Solar Energy Loan Fund, or SELF, and serves as chairwoman of the policy committee for the National Association of Latino Community Asset Builders, or NALCAB. Thank you both for joining us. Bree Rose has posted links to their bios in the chat, and we encourage you to learn more about their experience and their achievements as you listen to them today. To frame the discussion today, I want to share some thoughts. On President Trump's second day in office in January 2025, the White House issued an executive order claiming that 60 years of civil rights progress and enforcement are, quote, dangerous, demeaning, and immoral race and sex-based preferences under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And the order continues, those illegal DEI and DEIA policies also threaten the safety of American men, women, and children across the nation by diminishing the importance of individual merit, aptitude, hard work, and determination when selecting people for jobs and services. Although you might not remember reading the document at the time, you get the drift, and you can feel the chill. As you know, there are more Trump administration actions that go further in distorting the concepts of civil rights and racial justice. This administration believes, or claims to believe, that DEI, or more precisely racial equity, is unfair to white people, perhaps to white men most of all. That claim is the basis for the requirements that the Treasury Department, under the thumb of the Office of Management and Budget, is putting on CDFIs to deny that their work involves DEI. It's also the reason for the CDFI fund's position on opposition to the other targeted populations market definition. The administration's false premise is that there is no racial inequity or injustice involving access to capital for people of color in the United States. While changes at the fund affect CDFIs directly, the administration has and will go further. I received an email last week from someone fairly high up in the federal government suggesting that other regulations created to address racial injustice in mainstream finance, such as the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Fair Housing Act, may still yet be turned against CDFIs. This is a threat that goes well beyond CDFIs. It is an attack on people and communities of color, of diverse ethnicities, of diverse identities, and of many faiths. Today, our speakers are going to help us look forward at how they and their organizations approach racial equity and DEI as a core element in the CDFI sector's purpose. My generation of CDFI leaders came to this work in the second wave of the civil rights era that took root in the 1960s. My predecessor at OFN, Martin Paul Trimble, introduced language in the 1980s that CDFIs provide capital for social, economic, and political justice. In the early 2000s, as the industry faced a generational inflection point that led to our grow, change, or die strategy, I asked the OFN board at the time to articulate our reason for being, our core purpose. I suggested a variation on Martin Trimble's language, that the CDFI industry exists to align capital with social, economic, and political justice. It was a call for structural change in the systems that kept poor people poor and rich people rich. The OFN board at the time invested more than a month discussing it. And when we reconvened at the end of that month, Bill Bynum of Hope Enterprise Corporation talked at length about growing up in Bynum, North Carolina, the town that's named after the white people who owned his elders. Elsie Meeks, one of the early great leaders among Native CDFIs, talked about the strains and exhaustion of living and working as a Native woman in American culture and society. Calvin Holmes, the inspiring longtime leader of the Chicago Community Loan Fund, said that growing up in East St. Louis, Illinois, the word American was a dirty word. And Elise Cherry talked about the challenges and frustrations of being queer in an overwhelmingly straight culture. We all paused to take in what we were hearing when our board chair, Moises Loza, said, "Yes, I think we exist to align capital with social, economic, and political justice." Moises, who was then the CEO of the Housing Assistance Council, grew up in the colonias along the Texas-Mexico border and dedicated his working life to financing opportunities there and in other rural places. But that was then. Now we turn with appreciation to Amber and Dwan to help us think about the present and the future. One more thing before we turn the program over to Amber, who will start us off. We've learned that it helps everyone on a call like this when we start with a live group poll that takes the temperature of our participants. We have enough people here today to learn something that can help anchor our conversation today. So, Bree, if you'll post the poll, we'll take about 60 seconds to give people a chance to respond to it, and then we'll share the totals. We're getting great participation. Still a few folks haven't responded.
Okay, looks like it slowed down, Mark. I'm going to end the poll.
Great.
Everyone
So
should
can
be able to
everybody,
see the results.
what's that?
I said everyone should be able to see the results now.
Can everybody see the results? So what we see is a lot of concern and a lot of level-headed concern. People who are not discouraged and people who are discouraged, but there are also people who are fearful for the future of the CDFI sector. So I'm going to stop sharing, Bree, and turn it over to Amber. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to begin to share my screen. Okay. Share. And then, yeah. Here's my presentation mode. Sorry, I've got like the two little boxes overlapping, so I can't see my presentation button. Hold on one second.
I think if you click on the View tab or the Review, I think it's under View.
Oh, wait, they were going to go with this one. There we go.
That works too.
All right, success. First, let me just say thank you to Mark, to you, Bree, for inviting me to participate in this really critical conversation. And let me also give kudos to you and to your team for the amazing series that you all have been putting on and the content that you have been sharing within the industry. I myself personally have enjoyed watching some of the YouTube replays. So thank you for creating this platform to have this conversation. I like to call it the purple elephant, right? It's a discussion about all the things that we're not supposed to say right now, but are so critical to the work that we do. And if it's a conversation that we can't have or we won't have, we are playing right into the hands of those that think that this work is not important. And so I hope that this conversation today, as you mentioned, is a starting point for everyone. so that you're having these conversations within yourself, right? Some introspective work. You're having the conversations within your organizations, and then even more broadly, because the more information we have, the better we arm to face the challenge head on. So those are my thanks. Thank you so much for creating the space. Where we are, I think, Mark, you've done an excellent job of sort of setting some of the context for a lot of the recent events that have brought us to this inflection point and to this moment. But we have to move forward. We just concluded, the Alliance just concluded its um, fifth but fourth in-person convening last week, where we hosted about 170 people in New Orleans who came together and talked about um, just this year, how we move forward, how we go onward. And so that's what I'm hoping to provide some context here for you today. So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Amber Banks. I'm the president and CEO of the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs. A little bit about who we are and why we exist. We were born out of data that showed that Black-led CDFIs trail our white-led counterparts in terms of assets under management 6 to 1. And what this showed us was that, and that was a study from the Hope Policy Institute. And what that showed us was that there is a significant market failure that we're facing within the industry, where we have leaders who, with the same level of experience, expertise, same time in business, were really struggling to raise the capital that they need to support the communities that they serve. And so in 2018, a meeting of about 22 individuals translated into a founding in 2020 that was built on really 3 pillars. We want to help build capacity, so we operate a portfolio of about 9 programs for our members, where we help them with technology modernization, building networks, succession planning, a number of just really critical topics to help resource their organizations, but also provide the infrastructure necessary to continue their operations. We build bridges, so we have vendor directories and a number of other resources that we coalesce and make available to our members to help them with their efficiency and also with that scaling and building capacity. And then building power. We have a unit where we spend a pretty significant amount of our time with federal advocacy, and here lately, a lot of state campaign building as well. And so that is the Alliance. We have about 102 members across the country. That network covers every state and most territories in the US. And we believe that by resourcing these organizations, we all will benefit as a nation. So the moment that Mark mentioned, the executive orders that hit in 2025 sent us all into a little bit of a panic. I really like that survey that you had at the beginning, that third of you that are concerned but not discouraged. I definitely appreciate that. And I hope that the other roughly 60% of you that said you're concerned about the future and you're concerned and discouraged, I think was the word. Hopefully today's conversation helps to bring you up to being energized and really motivated around the moment of what's happening, because we do need that help. We do need your hands on the plow with us if we're going to get through this moment and get through it successfully and still gaining ground. So the funding atmosphere has softened, right? We have seen that even at the CDFI fund, trying to get those dollars out the door, right? Stalled there. About 12%, 12 to 15% of our members' budgets come from federal sources. And so seeing the softening on that side can potentially hurt. But also within the broader investment market, we have seen some philanthropy partners and others begin to move away from these DEI initiatives, change their language, shift their focus, maybe geographically. All of that translates into additional pressures that these organizations are facing while trying to serve their communities, who are also struggling, right? The end effect of all of these changes means additional barriers at the community level. The posture is hostile, and we've seen that. Mark went over those details as well. We know that federal ground is a little tough, which is why we've begun to shift towards more fertile ground at the state and local level, helping our members to really build those networks and engage with the ecosystems there. Our language being under attack, I think, goes back to biblical tactics. If they can't communicate with each other, if they don't have shared language, it becomes an enemy of progress, right? Here are all the words that you can't use. Here are all the names that you can't call out. Here are all the people that you can't say you're here to represent and to serve. And it goes directly against everything that CDFIs were created to help, to be gap fillers. I've been to convenings this year that were focused on Black issues where there was security at the door, right? We had to be extra vigilant about who's in the room because we don't know what bad actors or people with malintent are in these spaces, right? In our own conference, we experienced some of this as well. So there's a general tension that has developed across the industry, within organizations, that we all feel. There's a general, I think, valid fear that could exist, right? There's true risk that's a part of this moment, our careers, our livelihoods, but we can't let any of that deter us from the risk that our communities are facing as a result of this. We're not here and we don't exist because we thought it was just a good idea, but we recognize that there is a true need. Here we have a couple of the financial indicators as it relates to Black America and how we trail our neighbors and counterparts as it relates to wealth, homeownership, and being unbanked. And this is just the financial. If we were to extend this to other health indicators, we see the same thing. There's a real need for a focus and support on Black entrepreneurs, homeownership, and bringing financial services to Black communities. It's supported by data, and we see the history, and we know what's happened over the last 400 years. We have a long way to go, and a lot of these statistics, while they have improved, have not solved the problem. On a personal note, both of my parents, who were born and raised in Arkansas, were a part of the integrating class to their high schools. So if we just look at it in terms of generations, myself and my siblings are the first generation of our family to be born technically with equal rights. And so you think about the history of slavery and Reconstruction and whatever piece of history you want to point to and say that we're past this point, we're over it. Truly, we're not. The effects were felt all throughout civil rights and beyond, down to just the personal story of being able to say, no, this is the first generation that truly has had equal access. And even in that, the systems that were already in place still affect access and opportunity. Even if you're born in a generation where those rights are supposed to be in place, the systems to support those rights often move us in the wrong direction. So this slide really focuses on the benefits of the CDFI industry, which I don't want to assume that everyone in the room is seasoned and has been here for long. So, feel free to dive into those specifics on your own, but just as a highlight from some of the 2024 data, we know that CDFIs have not only been successful at deploying capital, reaching underserved populations, building affordable housing units and making them available to those that need it, but also this private capital, right? Being able to leverage those investments in the private sector. I've seen the ratio as high as 12 to 1, but certainly at least 8 to 1. And so all the investments through the CDFI fund and translate into deeper investments into the communities from those private investments. And so one of the things that continues to baffle me, not only about our history, but about this moment, is how we got to a point where inclusion became a bad word and inclusion became something to avoid. If everyone had equal access, if the playing field was level, the organizations wouldn't exist in the first place. The data would tell us that things were good and we'd all be, I don't know, doing something else. Maybe I'd be deep into that writing career I fantasize about at times, right? Right. We'd all be doing other things. But the truth is, inclusion should never be considered this additional thing that we do. It has to be the reason that we exist. And in my career, I've highlighted several programs that I've either been a part of ideating, building, launching, or administering, that where I really saw the difference that it makes when we have cultural competencies that are embedded in the product design and how services are delivered, whether that's through the women's business centers, Latino programs that are delivered in Spanish and with cultural competency, programs that focus on veterans, rural initiatives, and African Americans, all because we understand that these different groups have different challenges at times in terms of access, learning style, programs that work with mothers, understanding their schedule. All of this is a part of inclusion, and it's the reason that we're here. We're here to help folks who otherwise wouldn't have access to be able to engage. And so we have to continue to name the people and the communities that we're here to support. Why? It's just good customer service. If you don't know who your customers are and who you're trying to reach, who you're here to serve, there's no way that you can be effective at it. And my biggest concern is not that the work won't continue for the next couple of years. I think everybody that's in their positions, whether you're in the CDFI industry or beyond, they're committed. The passion is there, and they're there for the right reasons. My concern is that as we strip away language and the naming and the specificity, that when the next person comes into that role, that is when you really begin to lose the momentum. That's when you lose the commitment. That's when you will see the shifts that happen. And we want to make sure that's not the case. So how do we go forward as I wrap up in my final seconds? Yeah. There are a couple of things that to me I think are incredibly important in this moment. One is partnership. So I mentioned the CDFI industry, but also the broader economic mobility agenda, right? Health indicators, wealth indicators, organizations that are approaching this work from different vantage points, being able to partner, get on the same page about where we're headed, what we need, and build partnerships that will last, that will help support each organization through this moment and actually make us better on the other end. The only good thing about systems being torn down is that you have an opportunity to change and grow and build something new. And that's the opportunity that's before us right now. We have to be incredibly intentional about not allowing mission creep to happen, but that we stay focused and that we're moving forward in clarity. And third is that shared framework. Again, in building those partnerships, finding out what that common language is that translates through philanthropy and other stakeholders within our space, and making sure that we're speaking the same language so that our voice is unified. I think I'm beyond time, so I'm going to stop there. My final slide. But again, thanks for allowing me to be here. Really, I think the resilience that this moment calls for is around not losing our identity. Yes, we have to evolve. Yes, we have to go to Industry 4.0, but we can't lose who we are, and we can't lose focus on who we're here to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. That was inspiring and moving and compelling. So thank you. And I'm glad you didn't skip over that last slide. Thank you. So we are now going to turn to Dwan, and Dwan has a few slides to share as well. And I just want to say, as we're making this shift, that if you have any questions or you have things you want to ask our speakers, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them. Dwan, you're muted still, I see.
All right. Well, thank you, Amber. That was amazing, very inspiring, and tough act to follow, but I'll try. And just it's so great to be here today with you all. Thank you, Mark and Bree and CDFI Friendly America for having me represent NALCAB and self today. And I have to just start by saying that I have some notes. I don't usually have notes when I speak. I do quite a bit of public speaking, but there was so much I wanted to say here today that I had to actually work a lot. This was like the hardest webinar to prepare for in recent times for me. So I think that I'll start with the slide that you see up front here, which really speaks to the way I feel. Racial justice and equity, uh, the racial divide is real, and it's a burden that we all carry. And I am a Latina. I am from Bolivia, and I don't need permission or permission slip to talk about the things that are important to me and that have to do with my work. I don't have need permission to talk about the reality of racial inequities. I live it. I see it in our loan processes and the projects we finance. I see it in our communities every day. I know this. I experienced this. I work in this. So I want to start by just saying those are my words. I'm fully accountable for them. And it's important because we can't lose ourselves in this mire of confusion and chaos that is being generated around us. I think that I'm just going to give you some background. Dwan Andrade, the CEO of Self, as Mark already mentioned, and proud board member of NALCAB, that really I lead a CDFI that's a hybrid CDFI and green bank. We're based out of Florida. We're operating across 13 states with partners that are using our lending platform to deploy capital for green home improvements. What does that mean? Basically, building resilience in homes to withstand climate impacts. Something that is not really an issue about climate, but rather an issue about safety, health, and affordability in homes. And when we started this way back in 2012, really it was focused on Florida, but then we realized all of the South is so vulnerable, and then the rest of the country, there's some kind of climate impact happening all the time. And it's really low and moderate income people that don't have access to capital to protect their homes, their families, to protect their assets that needed help. So our equitable lending model is based on ability to repay. We have a flagship program that basically provides affordable capital, unsecured loans for people with 0 credit scores or with 800 credit scores. We don't care because we know that there are exclusions that have prevented people that are credit worthy from accessing capital at fair prices. So to date, we have deployed over $70 million in small loans. 72% are LMI households. Roughly 60% of those have what would be considered subprime credit and not credit worthy by the banking industry. And we have less than 2% default rates throughout history. So that in and of itself just proves that there's a market out there that is worthy of serving and wants to be served and wants to prove themselves, but the system keeps on leaving them out of access. So I think that right now we have a lot of pressure to stop using certain words and equity, inclusion, diversity. People don't experience words, right? They experience whether or not they have access to capital. And we were born from the civil rights movement. CDFIs were born from the civil rights movement, and our roots are in justice and facts about wealth gaps, what Amber just presented, what I will show to you in a minute. But we really don't get to walk away from history when it's politically inconvenient. That's the way I feel about it. So, sorry. Okay. So let's talk about the wealth gap. I think Amber touched on it, but really, this is a snapshot that, just says so much. The median Latino household wealth, 62,000, Black household wealth, 44,000, compared to 285,000. That is, 5 and 6 times that white households have in wealth compared to Latino and Black households. And then you look at Native American households, haven't even been tracked since 2020. This is not a personal failure of Black and Brown communities. It's a structural outcome. And this is what CDFIs are made to address. And I think it's just absolutely staggering that it would be something that we want to deny and just put a veil over. If you allow me for a minute, let me focus on the Latino output. We have been such a, you know, target lately. And these are facts. 19.5% of the population is Latino. We generate 28% of all new growth in US GDP. That's $4 trillion. And if we were a country, we'd be the world's 5th largest economy, growing faster than every major economy except China. Yet at least 15% can't even get a credit score. And this really, there's so much data that just makes me think and pause and, think about why I am here and why we all are working in this sector. I was born in Bolivia. I have lived in 4 or 5 continents throughout my life. And I have seen firsthand what happens in countries where wealth just flows one way towards those who already have wealth. And I've also been fortunate enough to work in places like Mexico and Bolivia and experience the transformation of providing access to capital to those that are excluded and the impact that that can have. So some more statistics. Even though we're producing all this wealth, all of us, Black and brown communities, 1 in 4 Black and Hispanics are credit invisible. You can't have a credit score. And that's what the system is based on and has been based on. It's exclusionary, not inclusionary, always has been. And Black and Latino households are 5 times more likely to be unbanked, which means that also it's interesting because I read this as well doing this research, is that Black and Latino communities are 10 times more likely to have a payday or a lender and a pawn shop within a mile of their communities versus white communities that are several miles away. What does that mean? They are actively being preyed upon, with 390% APRs for payday loans, waiting where banks won't go, this was from, I believe, 2023 survey of the FDIC. 20 million low-income households used payday loans, draining all these fees, more than $8 billion in fees from low-income communities because they did not have access to fair credit. A little bit more. The loan denial rates for entrepreneurs of color, the highest, 38%, Latino 33%, Asian 24%. It's the same economy, but we're seeing that the access is so different. And that is what CDFIs have done consistently since their creation, is provide access and fill those gaps. So I think that, we exist for a reason. And my internal slogan is we exist and we will persist. We were built to close these gaps. And we'll still be here when the politics move on, if that's what we decide to do and if we persist. It's Black, Latino, Native, rural, urban, immigrant, low income. These are the communities that mainstream capital left behind and the ones that we're meant to serve. I mean, there is so much pressure right now for us to go quiet, to scrub our words, to soften our missions. And whether we name it racial inequity directly or describe it as access or geography opportunity, whatever we want to use for words, the obligation to act on it does not change. And our job is not to win an argument or about language or, it's not to fight the words. I think my personal belief is that our job is to keep our doors open. It's to make sure that we all survive and that we keep lending and measuring honestly who we are serving, and that we will still be here when these politics move on. So that is kind of where I'm coming from. And just to share a little bit about what we're doing strategically speaking is, well, number one, we're still doing what we set out to do. But I think there are certain things that as an industry, we have to really focus on because of the things that Amber also showed us earlier, which is the um, uh, there's the restraining or constraining of capital access for us. Like there is just capital is getting more expensive. Some sources are, draining or becoming smaller. Philanthropy is extremely competitive. I mean, philanthropy, if I'm in their shoes right now, you don't know if you're going to invest in saving democracy or if you're going to go save public radios or you're going to help the CDFIs. I mean, there's a lot out there that has been left unfunded by the federal government, and there's a lot of competition, and the space is very crowded. So I think that as CDFIs, as an industry that works on finance, we have to, number one, get better. And what I mean by that is we have to focus on being more efficient, more professional. We have to manage risk. We have to be very good at managing our money, whatever resources we have. The second thing I think, and I'm a big fan of, is we need to leverage technology. We need to stay on point with mission and leverage technology to reach deeper into our markets. And then I think we also have to coordinate as an industry. Amber, also you touched on that, which is form partnerships that will add value and think about what paths we have to make sure that we endure and that we can get to a better level of self-sufficiency. And that's my last point. I think that as an industry, we've always operated at below, self-sufficiency levels because that's the way we can reach markets and keep our costs low. But I think that we do need to think more about our long-term sustainability and higher self-sufficiency rates. And I think that's a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwan. Before we do anything else, I want to first just thank you both for your clarity, your conviction, and your courage in coming here and speaking to us and speaking with us and sharing what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. We're grateful. As you both noted, this is not a safe time to talk about this, but it is a necessary time to talk about this. And thank you both for being here and stepping up on behalf of all of us and the industry. Um, the I want to start with a question that's just as practical as I can get, right? Which is what do you tell people in your different roles when they come to you and say, what do I do about the CDFI fund language, contractual language? What do you tell them? Do you tell them use your best judgment? Do you have a clear answer? I think everybody's trying to figure that out. One of the messages around the industry has been, change our message, but not our mission. Help me out here. Amber, Dwan's signaling you. So
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to get to that unmute.
good.
I think there's no one size fits all because each organization, you have to know your funders, you have to know your balance sheet, and to make some judgment calls, especially along with your board, right? Even if you're the leader of the organization, you still have a board of directors that you report to, and you got to make sure you're on the same page with your fiduciary leadership. So I would say one, yes, changing the message isn't necessary for everyone, but it may be for some, right? We have seen some real cases where organizations are saying because of the specificity in their market or their target, that they've had some real headwinds and challenges to come up as a result of that. So I think you have to do an assessment about your organization and where there may be risk and exposure and make some judgment calls. But overall, I would say changing your message if necessary, right? Maybe join some organizations or intermediaries that can help shield from some of that, right? So that we have shared voice and advocacy. But do that assessment of your organization to understand what your real risk and exposures are, and then make judgment calls based on those things and the leadership that helps guide your organization.
Thanks, Amber. Dwan?
Yeah, I agree with everything Amber said. And I guess it also depends on where you're at in your CDFI life cycle. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, I start by saying, I'm here as a Latina. I'm going to talk about it. Are you like, this is a free country. What are you going to do? I mean, I'm ready to face that backlash if needed. But because I have a certain level of maybe maturity in the sector, so that doesn't mean that, and trust me, I can tell stories of how I've been targeted as a green bank and a CDFI. I mean, I'm at the intersection of the two most hated things this administration has. So, trust me, I've been, but I think that, as I said earlier, this is not the fight. It isn't about winning a language argument, so I think very pragmatically, do what you need to do to keep your doors open to survive. And that is not giving up mission at all. But if you need to change some words around, uh, I mean, everybody has to assess, like Amber was saying, how important that is. But I just feel like that is not the most important thing, the words themselves. I think it's more important to do the work, regardless of how we order or change or use synonyms to words.
And one of the things that CDFIs, all CDFIs have, but perhaps is even more important for both of your organizations and for any organization representing communities of color, is that you need to be advocates for your community beyond just what CDFI, beyond just what a CDFI is doing, right? And so you've got to factor that into what's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yes.
Absolutely. That advocacy and representation is so important. And it can't be lost in this moment. Again, we have to know and remember who we're here to serve and who we're trying to impact. Even as a nonprofit, I like to say, if you're for profit and you're in the sale of something, if you're a nonprofit, you're also in the sale of impact.
Mhm.
To the extent that anything hinders your ability to reach your communities, you can't compromise. And I think that's where you have to draw the line. Is making this change going to make it harder for me to be impactful? And if it is, I say you have to hold on to it.
So the North Star there is the impact, right? I mean, that's what we're after. I want to ask
Correct.
a different question. When we got those poll results, I didn't know what they would be, obviously, and a high level of concern. Amber, I just want to ask you, having just come from your what looked like an extraordinarily wonderful gathering, convention, conference, was that the mood there? What were you hearing there about level of concern? Is that
Uh,
accurate?
sure. Great question. It was, um, everyone is still very committed to the work. They're still very energized around it. And I think it emphasized the importance of having these types of convenings where you can swap notes. So I think the commitment remains there. The resolve is there, but there's also a strong desire to have really tough conversations about the truth of our environment and what's coming and how we work through it. I think that's the focus is the how. We know the what and we know who we're serving, but how and making sure that we're creating space to talk about collaborations, partnerships, and new approaches to the work that get us to the other side of the moment. But folks are very committed and resolved.
I want to ask a question came up, and I'm gonna modify it a little bit. But one of the questions that came up in the chat was, how do we get CDFIs to truly work together? And there have been times when CDFIs have, in good times, it's easier to not work together in some way because there's plenty for everybody, right? And in times when there's at least a perception of scarcity and a reality of scarcity, and an external threat, if you will, or an external challenge. Um, what can we do? And I know that every trade organization I know of is working really hard to work together, I think. But what do we need to do? What do people here need to understand about what's got to happen so that we can continue doing the things we do in pursuit of impact, and whether that has a racial impact or an ethnic impact or a identity impact, whatever that is. What are your thoughts on that? What are the things we need to look forward to doing?
Well, I can get started.
Great.
I It's a very hard question.
It
And
is.
I don't have a specific answer, but I do want to just provide a little context before getting into that. And that is that, we're in this moment and we're talking about these issues, but I always go back to what is the underlying issue that they're trying to mess with. And it's not the words, I go back to it's not the words and how we express ourselves. It is our ability to sustain ourselves. And that for me is the critical, that's where we should be focused. And so that speaks to, I mean, what's at risk right now is us, many of us disappearing because not only the mission and what we do is kind of like this big, target. When we think about the practical implications of that, it's capital, right? It's the restricting of capital. It's the cost of capital. It's how do we flow capital into those communities when there is less of it for us? And is that the issue? So I think that we really have to stay focused on the fact that we're providing access to capital. Capital does everything for us. So in that context, I would say that the partnerships that we're thinking of have to empower our ability to flow capital to our communities to achieve our common missions. We all have overlapping missions here. So I think that we have to be careful about just, partnering for, I don't know, like one organization with one organization, two struggling organizations don't necessarily make one whole organization. So
Mhm.
that implies also putting aside a little bit sometimes our egos in terms of, oh, we're doing this great work, and maybe it's okay if I get absorbed by something with somebody bigger than me. It's not just, equal partnerships. And I think we struggle with that. They say we're also passionate about our babies and our work and the stuff we do that sometimes I think that is a barrier to these open partnerships. So I think we have to
Mhm.
be very pragmatic and say, where is it that we have a better chance of surviving, of making a whole organization, and of deploying capital? What makes us stronger? It's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
but that's where I would focus.
Well, that's pragmatic and it's highly strategic, right? It's really about what do we need to do differently across our industry
Yeah.
so that we can be, as you talked about earlier, Dwan, and Amber, you've touched on, how do we become more sustainable? How do we help each other more so that we can ultimately help the people we're trying to work, we're trying to serve, right? Amber, are you going to say something there? I thought.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that one. I think it's a trust factor, which right starts with like exposure to the possibilities of what works and learning about what hasn't worked. And so we had a session about collaboration at the conference where we brought up on stage some members to talk about what some of these historic partnerships have looked like. And it's like the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Here's what to look out for. And so I think exposure to the possibilities and examples of what working together has looked like in the past, and then pulling out some of those best practices and watch out for this, so it leads to better design of a partnership and collaboration. And then I think honestly, the investor market is going to start to drive collaboration on its own. I see so many of these like RFPs and things where funders are looking for opportunities where there are very clear on-ramps for that investment, but there's also very defined pathways to scale. And so, no one organization, maybe, especially if they are very local focused, maybe can go after these opportunities, but together we can make a clear case for why investment in all leads to impact in our respective spaces.
Yeah. I mean, having the discussion and getting it out there across boundaries, right? Across
Yes.
organizations
And,
is really
and Mark,
important. Go on. Yeah. Yeah,
can I
of
say one
course.
more thing about that? I think that one of the biggest challenges we have in this industry is that we're all creating programs, kind of bespoke programs and solutions and financial products to the situations that we're dealing with locally many times. So there is a lack of standardization. I've always been like, I hate the word standardization because it just feels like it just, messes with my creativity. But and it does, because CDFIs are creative. They're innovating with solutions that the market does not take care of. And that's why we exist. So it's hard to put together pieces that are non-standard. And that's one of the biggest challenges to scaling as well. And that's just the practical reality again, is that like how do we, merge or combine products when we have such different underwriting methods and systems and, products, and how do we go to secondary markets? So I think that's something that, to Amber's point, that the capital market is going to push us towards inevitably. And I think we have to be okay with saying, yes, we have to maybe look a little bit more mainstream, at least in one vertical, to be able to do the creative work on this other side.
I find that for both of you, I find that really, really fascinating because in the past, when we've had one sort of crisis, small c crisis or another in the industry, the investors have been really slow to want to get in to even though they'll privately say yes we want to see consolidation or yes we want to see them work together differently, they're very reluctant to do that. So maybe it's different this time, and that'd be interesting if it were. I think that's a really interesting observation. And Amber, just or to you were talking about the session you did at your conference on collaboration. I thought you were going to say this. When I was at OFN once at one conference, we did a session because we were always talking about best practices because it was fun to talk about best practices. We did a session on worst practices, things that did.
Love
But I
that.
think that's important. I think that we need to be thinking about what have we learned, right? What do we need to do differently going forward, for all the reasons that you said. So I'm gonna try to end this conversation, and there will be more conversation. We'll post soon in a few minutes. We'll post a link to the sign up for small group discussions for anybody who wants to do that. But let's talk about allies and the allies who can support you and who should support you, and whether those are individual white people who need to, step up. Whether that's organizations, someone posted about how can storytelling and communications better help what you're trying to do, and there are other examples as well. And I just, I know it can be a hard question to answer, but I just wanted to put it out there and see if you have thoughts on
Oh yeah, we'll take everybody's help and support. That's the
it.
short answer. If you're willing to engage with us and you really feel very aligned with our mission and our messaging, I think there's all sorts of ways that you can be supportive. The messaging part and the communications allies is very important. I mean, CDFIs themselves are just like the best kept secret, right? I feel like
Yep, yep.
when I talk about what I do, I have to talk about it in three stages.
Hmm.
And the first stage is who are CDFIs? What do they do? And so a huge opportunity. I think there needs to be a more coordinated and elevated campaign in general for the industry, but then
Right.
also just helping to tell the story in terms of the case making for other groups is really important as well. Can't there is no way I can't underscore how important that is to have allies to share those messages and to support in that way.
Thank you. Dwan.
Yeah, again, echoing what Amber said and adding that I think the messaging piece is super important. And I agree that telling the story through the lens of economic development and empowerment is a little bit of that shift in tone, not in actual message, right? And in terms of the importance of the work that CDFIs are doing. I also think that we have a lot of allies that we don't tap into often enough, and those may be the local governments and local, um, uh, community organizations. But one in particular that we work with very closely is the workforce. So, for example, contractors that use our financing, they need to be our strongest allies because we are enabling them to do more business. So, who are we working with? Not necessarily directly for, but with, that can be carriers of our messages and allies to us and say, wait a second, if I don't have self or if I don't have a CDFI providing financing for my project doesn't get done. And then I don't support my own business and I can't get my work done. Same for small businesses. Small businesses are a great ally for CDFIs, and we should be telling the story through their voices. So those
Right.
are some of the
Those,
thoughts that I have.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you both for being brief because we're coming up at the end of our hour. It just clicked to 3 o'clock on my clock here. The conversation needs to continue. It will continue without a doubt. Thank you both for being, as I said, courageous leaders who are stepping up and giving us some guidance on how we move forward. And I know that others in the industry will do the same. But I really want to thank you both for being here. We'll continue the conversation, but we won't continue it on this event, on this episode. The Bree Rose posted the link for small group discussions for anybody who wants to continue the conversation in a smaller setting where it's easier to have a different kind of conversation. And I think we all want to wish both of you and your organizations the best, and we want to be allies and we want to support you. So we look forward to being able to do that. Thank you to everybody for being here.